Hey everybody, it's Nick Olson, Chupacabra Offroad, and today let's get into part 2 of our B2G storage rack and tire carrier for you X3 owners. It is Tuesday, November 2nd, so we're on our second generation. We'll show you some of our upgrades, we'll talk about it, we'll give you some dimensions. I got the tape measure as you can see. A lot of questions online. Let's show you guys where we're at, show you the progress. Getting excited, this thing's almost ready for retail. So if you guys haven't watched the first video kind of gives some of the details. We launched this product right before the sand show. We displayed it for some of our potential customers back in September in Orange County. We wanted to kind of feel people out, see what they thought about it, see if they had any ideas, suggestions, recommendations. And honestly, we had just barely got our first prototype ready for that event. So when we had this thing designed in CAD versus when we went into the real world is when things changed a little bit. It was a little longer than I was hoping for it to be. And we've since kind of looked at our design, looked at our first generation, and made a couple of improvements that we'll get into here in a second. So probably the biggest improvement you're gonna see is a reduction in length. Now, I've got my tape measure, and when we look at how far it comes off of the tail light, we are right about 14 to 14 and a half inches, which was the design goal. The first prototype we made was a little bit longer. It ended up being about 18 or 19 inches long, and that just related to the real world, taking the design, like I said, to real life. The two bends end up being a little longer, and this top lid section ended up just being really long, making it more than roomy for this tire. So speaking of this tire, this is a 33-inch tensor tire. This is really what we designed it to fit. Now, some of you might say, hey, will it fit a 35? Looking at the space, technically you could squeeze a 35 on here. We think a lot of Can-Am customers have gone away from that, so we thought 33 was kind of the right special sauce, 33 and below for most of you Can-Am users. So as you can see here, you got a little bit of a gap here in terms of space-wise. If you come over here to the back part of the lid, we still have a little extra room here, and you got a little bit of room on each side. Nice roomy fit for the 33 on top of condensing down the length of it. And here's what it looks like when we've got it all lifted up. Here you see the tire barely rubs on the intake. And you'll see how much more it opens up here in a minute when we take the tire off. Enough to have easy access into your cooler. Another thing too, with these struts, we've been experimenting on different PSIs. So 35 PSI is great if you don't have a tire, it's not enough. But when we take the tire off, it's pretty hard to pull it down and it can spring up on you. So that's some of the things we're kind of working on, which PSI of strut is going to be ideal for this application with and without a tire. Latch system, let's just talk about that since we just closed it. This is a pretty simplistic latch. It does have an option for a lock. You can adjust the tension on it. There are some lock nuts that I've removed, but as you can see, it's a pretty good system. It's fairly clean, and obviously just kind of spinning it and moving it around will allow you to adjust the tension. It worked really well. So speaking of working really well, last weekend we put about 240 miles on this thing out in Glamis. I just picked up this Can-Am, put about a 30-mile shakedown. I wanted to drive it how it was completely stock before we added this section, and we're about 270 miles on our Speedo. So like I said, a good 200, 230, 240 miles to get an idea of how things have kind of started to shake down. And so far, the latch works really well. It's simplistic, it's fairly inexpensive, and you can lock it. So we might stay with it for the most part, unless you find something that's maybe a little bit more elegant looking, but tends to tie in nice, work good, and you can adjust the tension over time if you needed to. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the tire. Now I like the idea of using this Y-strap ratchet mechanism. I've used it on my race car, I've used it on my other vehicle before, and it just makes it nice and easy to come off. One other option of potential storage would be, you know, putting your options like you can add another company's spared bag that goes inside of a wheel. So that would work well for like a tow strap and maybe a couple other little things that you could fit here, so you're not losing any of that dead space while you are carrying your spare tire. So version 2, like I said, the dimensions have changed a little bit, and like I said, most importantly, lengthwise. So a lot of you guys ask, hey, if I want to purchase this from X3, will it still fit in my toy hauler? Now, some of you guys might know if you are running bigger oversized tires like a 32, it's going to protrude past the tail light, so you're gonna have to figure out what that measurement is for those of you at home. But off of the rear tail light, we're about 14 to 14 and a half inches in terms of overall length past the rear of the car. Speaking of dimensions, width-wise, on the top of the lid here, we're right about 30 inches. and then it narrows up here to its narrower point of about 22 inches. From the top of the lid here, we are at about 32.5 inches in length. Now, these dimensions vary a little bit slightly from the box. So coming in here to the box, inner width, we are right at about 25.25 inches at the widest point, and that narrows down to about 18.125 at the narrow intersection. Now, one thing, if you guys watched part one, you saw we fit a Yeti 35 cooler. It's a good size all day hard cooler. The dimensions of this box are set up to still fit that cooler. We end up flattening it out so you've got room for that as well as some additional space. So speaking of coolers, here's a cooler that I have in here just to show you guys some scale. This cooler is about 18.5 wide. It is about 13 inches tall, and it's 9 inches wide. So as you can see with this cooler, you still got a lot of space. I ran this cooler last weekend in the dunes along with my Boxel tool roll. Here's a spare belt, again, to show you some scale. I had a camera bag. We also had a couple other ancillary items like a toe strap. You see the belt here, ratchet straps, those type of things, and we had plenty of space. So it's a very roomy box. I think we could make it even a little bit more stylish with a smaller box, but I'm really liking the size of this. So it's one of those things, it's always a trade-off, right? We can make it a little more svelte looking, but the reason why we're making this product is to, you know, have plenty of room for your storage as well as your spare tire. So really liking the size of that. We're gonna test different cooler types, soft coolers, hard coolers. I'm a soft cooler fan myself. I feel like you get more storage out of them. They tend to work well, but you know, to each your own. So we have a little bit of rubber molding here that we were testing. You can see it's already had some initial wear, so it might go with something separate. It's also going to be relational to the final product in terms of the size of the welds and the dimension of the box. Now, this box is handmade out of aluminum. Product's made 100% here in the USA. We're also going to be testing a plastic box, so we're waiting on the mold for that to show up. I think there's some benefits of plastic that we want to test. It's lighter weight, it's less expensive. You potentially reduce some of the rattly tinny noise if this did develop on this vehicle. So noise, obviously we want to have some type of a seal here. This is going to keep as many contaminants out as possible. We did get a little bit of sand and dust in here to be expected, but also reducing any type of rattling. Now, we did, like I said, over 230 miles in the sand dunes. I didn't hear any type of rattle or noise. Like I said, I drove the vehicle before I had this mounted up just to have that sense of comparison. But so far, so good. I also think the plastic box could even reduce that further, potentially over time, or any rocks flying off of it. We're gonna go test in different environments, and I think I'll be able to get more of an idea of if it does sound rattly or tinny on the harder packed trails here in Arizona, the rockier stuff you guys know about if you're from the area like me. So I'm gonna close the lid and show you some of the additional design changes. First off, you'll notice how it closed down. We wanted to add a box section. We think it's a little bit more stylish. We can add some branding here. We're gonna make some tweaks, but in terms of how it lands, we're also gonna wanna do some rubber as well, again, to prevent any vibration, but it's just more of a stylistic difference. Speaking of style, we've added a rear wide plate and sort of a skid plate, and as it links up down to our radius rod connecting point. Now, the radius rod connection point, the first version, we only had one tube, but as we have decided to commit to also mounting off of the radius rod plate, we wanted to clean it up a little and have it look a little bit better. Again, this is still a rough prototype, so we have a lot of room for improvement, and it will fit some of the aftermarket radius rod plates, so we'll get into that. We'll be testing an aftermarket radius rod plate because it's something I'm gonna have to upgrade, and a lot of you Can-Am owners upgrade as well, of course, just because the stock stuff's pretty weak. And while I'm down here, speaking of connection points, you've got the bracing here, you've got a plate that we created that mounts onto the stock exhaust mount, and then it ties in up top. And the box itself will connect with 6 screws to the big mounting plate bracket. So you've got 3 attachment points. And as you can see, it's pretty solid. There's no additional mounting or movement or vibration. Coming up here to the front, this is a big change that we made over the first generation. We decided to box the entire section in. Now, this works well for a number of reasons. Of course, it makes it significantly stiffer. We decided to use this stock square bar, which comes from the factory, and we've got 2 mounting points on each side. So right where my finger is a screw threading into the stock location, Then we've also got it tying into an outer location here. So we've got double the mounting points. We've got some square box section, making it much more stiff and rigid. And it also is going to be a nice potential opportunity to mount other accessories like some rear chase lights. As you can see, I've got my whip control box mounted right here, and I was easily able to go ahead and plug it in when I was out in the dunes. So those are the big structural improvements we made over the first generation. I think it's coming together with a little bit more style, a little bit more compact size, but keeping the size where we want it for the optimal storage for cooler like the Yeti 35, 33-inch spare, and so on. One thing else you're gonna notice here is something that we're learning. Now, this product is designed to work with both stock and aftermarket roll cages. Those cages land in a variety of different places. So for the time being, we created a mount, and we also used some of the hardware off of our new 11-inch Super Deluxe center mirror to mount to the roll cage, because as you guys know, the stock Can-Am roll cage is very scary. And before we had this mounted, the entire rear pillar will just kind of flex on this plate. So we needed something that was stiffer. As you can see, we have some other bracketry that holds the rear on to the roll cage. So this is something that worked well for this trip, but we're also going to continue to work at preventing this and tying into the back of the taillight here, because we don't want any long-term issues, hardware coming loose with the tail lights. You know, so we're going to work on an attachment point that's closer over to the side of the B2G without inhibiting its function ability of opening. So a lot of design elements that go to put this whole thing together. You know, started off with some 3D scans, design team, you know, generation 1, generation 2, and then generation 3 will be happening soon once we get the new plastic box to prototype off of. So I think we're dialing in on the exact size, the style, the shape, the functionality. Now it's making sure that we run this thing hard, we don't encounter any issues, and we circle back and we find a better mechanism that's going to allow the rear section of the X3 to bolt up and not have any vibration no matter what cage you have, 2 or 4 seater, and you know, make sure that this thing is ready for retail. So one other addition, to use the B2G, you do have to run an aftermarket exhaust to have the clearance. So speaking of removing your exhaust, that exhaust is very heavy. Coming up soon, we're gonna have some weight differences. That's one question that we also get is, hey, does this weigh a lot more than stock? How much more does it weigh? We're gonna weigh all these components independently, but one nice addition to adding an aftermarket exhaust is you take a lot of weight off the rear of the car and you move it up here closer. This aftermarket exhaust is by a local company called Ironclad. It is a quality product made here in the USA. It's a little bit louder than stock. Here's some audio clips of it running both at idle, along with giving it a little bit of gas and some higher RPMs. Now, compared to the previous exhaust we used, one thing that I like about the Ironclad is a nice solid mounting bracket over here using the stock frame, whereas the K-Fab mounted directly out of the motor itself. So an additional attachment point is nice. As you can see, it's got a nice stylish teardrop exit, and it keeps all the heat away from our box, so we don't have to worry about heating up our storage box here. So this is a good choice. Like I said, they're a local company. It's a high quality product. Good company to work with. We're going to be exploring additional options, so we're not sure if this will be our final, but maybe one of our choices for you customers. You can go ahead and make a pick on what you'd like. Like I said, the beauty of the exhaust, of course, you're picking up a cool sound, you're dropping some weight, you're getting some performance. You're going from a 2.5-inch exhaust to a 3.0-inch exhaust, so it's going to work well with you guys that are running a stage 2 and above tune. You might even need one anyway if that's what you're doing, and it's a good way to clear up the space that we need so we can keep all of our weight low, that race style, stylish. You know, there's a lot of room back here once you remove the stock muffler. So it's a win-win, but it is one of those things you need to do to install the B2G. So product development, making some changes, making some tweaks, trying to figure out all the bugs before we go to market. It's a fun process. We're learning a lot. We're getting very close We just want to make sure we're doing all of our legwork before we release it to you guys, so that when you do purchase, you're happy. This thing works exactly as it intends. For you, those of you that want to go on a lightweight setup out to the dunes and need some storage, long rides like we do here on Chupacabra Offroad, Baja, etc. And it's a quality, solid option made in the USA here that you guys are gonna be excited about running on your Can-Am. So if you guys like the content, like seeing more of the progression, tune back into our YouTube channel, check out our website, Chupacabra Offroad. We've got updated photos. You can learn more there. We'll be posting updates on social every time this thing hits the dirt. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.